You, Admiral. A few things here. The president called conditional aid for Israel a worthwhile thought. Is he actually considering conditioning aid or not?
What he also said, right after acknowledging that it was a worthwhile thought, was that the approach he has chosen to take so far has produced results and outcomes. Many of them I just walked you through in my opening statement.
Don't change the subject, just answer the fucking question.
So the approach that we're taking with Israel, and quite frankly with our partners in the region, is working. It's getting aid into people that need it. It's getting a pause in the fighting. It's getting hostages out. It's getting Americans out. And quite frankly, we continue to urge and will continue to urge the Israelis as they conduct military operations to do so with the utmost care for innocent civilian life.
The Democrats in his party who say we need to start conditioning aid going forward, what would he say then?
Nice.
I think he would say exactly what he said to y'all yesterday when he got asked this question. It's a worthwhile thought, but the approach that I'm taking now is working. The approach that we're taking now is working. It's getting results.
The increasing dangers to U.S. military personnel in the Gulf. I know you outlined in a series of appearances this morning what happened, but are we to continue seeing this sort of, well, let me put it this way, is that strategy of dealing with it as it happens going to continue to be the strategy? You've seen some say there should perhaps be a more robust response to these ongoing attacks, whether it's from Iranian-backed militias in Syria or Iraq, whether it's the Houthis. Is there any thought of changing up how that's done?
I don't think we're going to get in the business of telegraphing our punches, Ed. We've responded forcefully.
Really?
Against the threats to our forces in Iraq and Syria, and now our forces in the Gulf region, the Gulf of Oman, Gulf of Aden. We'll continue to do that as appropriate.
Is striking in Yemen still an option?
Again, I'm not going to telegraph punches. We will take the steps appropriate to protect our troops and our forces in the Middle East region. I would add that the Mason is attached to the USS Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group, which the president dispatched to the region specifically to address the increase in the tensions.
Okay.
On the remaining Americans who are being held, do you have any more clarity on whether they're being held by Hamas or with one of these other terrorist groups?
No.
And, all along you've been very clear about concerns that a broader ceasefire would only benefit Hamas. Sullivan was pretty clear yesterday in saying that, Hamas has been able to gain some benefit from this. How concerned are you that the longer this truce lasts, now 6 days, that Hamas will benefit? And how do you weigh that?
It's a real risk. You have to expect a group like Hamas, a terrorist group, which clearly doesn't abide by laws of war, will try to take advantage of any pause in the fighting for their own benefit. So we're watching that closely, as well as our Israeli counterparts. You can bet that they're watching that closely. And I don't want to speak for the Israelis, but I mean, this is a calculated risk that Prime Minister Netanyahu and his war cabinet are willing to take in order to get those hostages out. So it's a balance. And as you've also heard the Israelis say, that once the pauses are over, they intend to go right back at military operations.
And when you say that Hamas has been able to get some benefit so far, is that restocking, resupplying? What is that benefit?
I would just say that, without getting into intelligence issues, that any pause in the fighting could benefit your enemy in terms of time to refit, to rest your fighters, to rearm them, re-equip them. A pause in the fighting can be seen as a benefit. But I want to stress, and this was always part of the calculus, any discussion of pauses was always part of the calculus, that Hamas might try to benefit from it. But so too have the Israeli people benefited by the return of their loved ones and hostages. So too have the American people benefited now with little Abigail back with her family. So again, it's a balance.
No.
And again, I won't speak for the Israeli Defense Forces, but when these pauses are over, then they have made it very clear that they're going to continue to target Hamas leadership.
Statement at the top, you thank the government of Qatar for this 2-day pause that has been reached. What level of involvement was the U.S. government in securing this agreement?
Ooh, that's a bingo.
Very much so. I also mentioned in my opening statement that President Biden has been personally involved in getting the original deal in place. and loosening up a snag that happened over the weekend, as well as working with partners, Qatar and Israel specifically, in the last 24 to 48 hours to get this extension announced.
Congress comes back tomorrow. What's the priority level for securing those aid packages for both Israel and Ukraine?
Very, very high, John. I mean, we desperately need the supplemental funding that the president asked for. And I would remind members of Congress as they come back to work that the figures in that supplemental request are well informed by our Ukrainian partners and our Israeli partners. We didn't just pull those figures out of thin air. It was very much in keeping with what our partners have told us they need for the coming months. And in both cases, the runway keeps getting shorter and shorter. You've seen that in the case of Ukraine, the drawdown packages that we've been providing are now at smaller increments in terms of how much money is being allocated, because we just don't have the flexibility that we once had in terms of the amount of aid that can be given in each and every package. And look, we're in a critical time here.
That's what she said.
Winter months are upon us. They're upon the Ukrainian army particularly, and it's going to be tougher and tougher for them to conduct operations when the weather gets less conducive to do so. So we hope that when Congress comes back to work, that they'll act with the same sense of alacrity that we've been trying to act in terms of getting that supplemental through.
There was reports saying that the president said that he's sorry and he's disappointed in himself after meeting with the Muslim leaders.
Oh boy. Here we go.
Do you think that the president could have done more to show sympathy towards Palestinian civilians who are being seen as even-handed?
I'm not going to discuss reports of private meetings. As I said earlier, the president understands there's strong feelings here on all sides. And as he's also said publicly, he doesn't want to see any more innocent civilians killed or wounded as a result of the fighting in Gaza. Not one. I mean, the right number of civilian casualties is 0.
Is he all right upstairs?
We understand there have been many, many thousands of them. And we understand that with each and every one of those data points is a grieving family. The president understands that. And that's why we're going to continue to urge our Israeli counterparts as they go back, they plan to go back to military operations, that they do it in the most discreet, deliberate, careful, cautious way possible.
Yeah!